Welcome to the Rural Revival Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Larson. Today we're talking with Christy Jo of the Strawberry Patch and the Fruit Tea Chicks. She's sharing about her journey of learning to express herself through art, which eventually led to these two fun, creative businesses that Christy has started out of Hartsville, Tennessee. With the fall show coming up in September and some exciting things on the horizon for the Fruit Tea Chicks, you're going to love our conversation with Christy Jo. So here we go. Well, today we're coming at you from Starlite Farm in Hartsville, Tennessee with Christy Jo of the Fruit Tea Chicks and the Strawberry Patch Barn Sale. Thanks for being on the podcast, Christy.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I first met Christy at the Vintage Pick and Barn Sale down in Fife, Alabama. So, Christy, tell us a little bit about you and what led you to be an entrepreneur.
Well, I have 3 children, and I guess ultimately that's kind of what paved the road for and gave me the opportunity to start these businesses. I had the opportunity to stay at home with them for about 8 years, and I guess I was starting to get a little bit finicky just being a mom and playing Barbies, and so I would find myself at night playing on the computer and looking up different, websites, and blogs were really big back then. And I got into sewing, and I started making all the kids' clothes, and before long, I was in a few stores selling diaper bags and totes and even like applique shirts and stuff. And then somehow that just led to me discovering a trend up west in Washington State called barn sales. And it kind of just opened my mind I knew there was nothing like that anywhere here. So I thought, I wonder if that would work here. And I started kind of exploring that. Visited the Country Living Fair in Columbus, Ohio, where I met a girl named Gina Bishop, homegirl. She's super talented, and as soon as I got there, her booth just jumped out at me, and for some reason I wanted to meet her. And she was, so friendly. She's just full of energy and just full of life and bubbly. And so I went up to her and I introduced myself, and she's, for some reason, started talking about a barn sale she had in her backyard, like just in her backyard. And I was like, hey, I've been wanting to do that. And she basically looked at me and said, well, what are you waiting on? I mean, she's just straightforward, and,
I love that.
And I was like, yeah, what am I waiting on? Of course, failure has always been a big thing to me. I never wanted to risk failing or trying anything that I didn't think I could be wonderful at. But anyway, so she kind of, gave me that extra little boost of confidence to give it a whirl. But so that's kind of how it all got started, just from being at home with my kids. And because I really even never had a clue that I was creative at all. Being from a small town, wasn't okay to get off the beaten path. Everybody was straight-laced, and
Yep.
I always had it in me to want to dress a little bit different. Like back then, I wanted to go to Goodwill and buy clothes, but, it just wasn't accepted. People would make fun of you, so I chose just to kind of stay on that path. Then I went to Ole Miss. I stayed there for a year and a half, but one of my roommates was an art major, and she would come back and she would have all these little projects that she would make, as an assignment. And I'd be like, Jeannie, please let me take that home. Like, I was just like, I was just so impressed. And because like I said, being from a small town, arts weren't pushed. We had a really good art teacher, but the program, arts it just wasn't something that you did. So, yes, my roommate, her mother was huge. She was big into sewing and just a great seamstress. I mean, there wasn't anything she couldn't make. So I fell in love with sewing, or the ability, or that art, when I was at Ole Miss. And then I still couldn't really express myself at that school, though, because, like I said, it was uniform, and everybody was, truly the same. So I ended up transferring to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and I was able to tap into myself there. They had people, all kinds. There were your hippies, and there were your straight-laced, and there were your alternative, and then there were your smart kids, and, all different races. So I ended up taking a semester off from college and traveling to Australia. I was supposed to be there for 6 months. I ended up only staying about 4 months, though. But, while I was there, it truly opened my eyes up to handmade. They would have these little pop-up markets on the beach, and where people would sit and they would peddle their wares just right there on the beach. And it was colorful. It was bright. It was handmade. And so I would buy stuff and ship it back home. So that's kind of where my love for handmade came in. So from college, I graduated in '98 from UT Knoxville, and then I started working for the Department of Corrections. I was an internal affairs investigator within the prison system. So I investigated crimes within the prison, and that was a really great job. But at that point, I'd had Chloe was born, and it was in Nashville, and we were living in Lafayette. It was just a long drive, and I didn't feel like I was able to be a mom,
Yeah.
So then I got pregnant with my second child, and after that is when I decided that, I needed to be at home. And then I started, painting on canvas. I just thought, I'm going to try this. I'm just going to see what this is like. And I would stay up at night with a glass of wine after I put the kids to bed, and I would just paint on a canvas. And so then I started trying to sell this work, which is kind of comical now, but I'll never forget my best friend now, Tracy Barlow. She had a little store in Hendersonville called One Man's Treasure, but at the time we weren't friends. She didn't know me. She only knew me as someone that come in there to buy stuff, and there was a little cafe in there, and I'd go in there and eat. And so I finally got enough nerve to go in there and say, hey, you think you'd buy some of this work? Abstract. It was all abstract. And she pretty much looked at it and laughed. She was like, oh, I like it, but it just won't fit here. So, it's kind of funny now, because now, like, when, vendors apply to my sale, and, I try to tell them, just because I don't let you in doesn't mean I don't like it, but I try to pick stuff that's good for the shoppers and the customers,
Sure.
I hate to just take your money knowing that it's probably not going to sell, or,
Yeah.
So, anyway, she told me no. And so then after that is when I started sewing. And I would make diaper bags and purses, and started selling them there in her store. And then eventually, like I said, I ended up having the barn sale in my backyard. And I just pulled together some people, local people. They were artists, and I was a member of the local garden club. So there's a lot of older women in there that were very classy ladies that were, appreciated art and were artists themselves. So I invited a bunch of them, and we just had like a little meeting, and we decided that we'd give it a try in my backyard. I had a building back there that was kind of a barn, and I just cleared it out, and that's how we got started.
I love it. How did you decide what you wanted the barn sale to be? And when you all came together, like, did you decide on a theme, or was it just kind of random and like, we're just going to try this?
I think originally when I got started, it was more about, I'm just going to try this and do the best I can with what I have, because I really didn't know what I was doing. Nobody else around was doing it. I didn't have nobody to help me or guide me or direct me. At that point, I still hadn't visited the barn sale in Washington State. So I knew I wanted to set up the stage. I wanted everybody to bring me their stuff, and I kind of decorated the barn as a store. But eventually, it got too big, and so I had to, I started letting everybody build their own tent, so to speak. And I would put my stuff inside the building and make it like I would stay up late at night. That was just kind of like my little happy place. I would just stay up, and I had, sheets all on the ceiling and all over the walls. And then, like I said, we had like 10 vendors outside set up, and that was it.
Wow.
I mean, I was in a neighborhood, like, we couldn't hold hardly any people. But, it grew pretty quick. I think maybe the first time we may have had, I think we had maybe 25 people at the sneak peek and maybe 150 the whole weekend. But, honey, I thought that was I was tickled to death for that. So I ended up, unfortunately, going through a divorce. So we had to sell the house. But honestly, I had already got to the point where I was kind of busting out the seams there. I couldn't get the feel that I wanted it to have.
Okay.
So it was time for it to move anyway. And so it just made sense to go to Starlite. Which, sometimes you have to be forced into things to let things happen, because I've never been one to want to grow too fast. I wanted to be busting out the seams before, I make the next move or whatever. Mm-hmm. So we moved it down there, and it just kind of exploded, I guess you would say, after that, because it's just a great environment. There's, so much more room. The parking's there. I have a huge barn that'll hold 40 vendors. So we moved it down there, and then that's when I started being able to turn it into what I wanted it to be.
Okay.
That's when I started realizing I want this to be an experience. I want this to be intimate. I want this to be a place where people not only come to shop, but they come and spend the whole day, and they'll come back 3 days, in a row, just so that they can sit there and listen to the music and look at the pond, or, watch the people. So that's how I finally decided what I wanted it to be, was when I moved it to Starlite.
Awesome. So yeah, talk more about that. I mean, I know you have quite a long list of vendors. So once you had the space and the room to expand and grow this to what you wanted it to be, how did you start to decide, this is the look and feel I want it to have? These are the types of vendors I want. What was that process like?
Well, when I went to visit the Barnhouse Boys in Washington State, the thing I remember most about their sale was that it was so consistent, the look. I mean, it was uniform. I mean, it was easy to the eye. I mean, your eye just could flow. There was no distractions. Everything, each vendor looked the same, but it was so clean. So I knew, first of all, that I wanted, because I had been to craft shows where I think to me, that's one of the mistakes that some shows have, is they let people bring in blue, brown tints, and I want all my tints to be white, because it just creates a clean look when you come in. Mm-hmm. But that was one of the things I noticed about them, and it was so, the design ability of those vendors there was just, I mean, honestly, I don't know that I've ever seen a show quite that good.
Wow.
I mean, and they don't even do it anymore.
Huh.
But they had this huge fall, and it was on their farm. They lived in a little old country farmhouse, but the setting, I mean, was just beautiful. Of course, Washington State's just gorgeous anyway. It's so green and lush, and the weather's perfect. And if you hit it the right time. But so I knew coming back home, that's what I wanted. But also, I didn't want it to be just vintage and antiques. Mm-hmm. I have a love for handmade too, so I wanted to incorporate handmade into it as well. Some people, don't like that, but for me, that's what I like, and I know it's not about what I like, but I guess if I can put get my one little thing in there, I feel like a good mix of not only antiques and vintage, but handmade, good quality handmade stuff as well.
I love that. I can just tell that, you have a creative bent towards everything that you do. And it's evident even when I came across you at the Vintage Pick and Sale. Your Fruit Tea Chicks trailer is adorable. So, and we'll get into that more later. But how did you get the word out then once the barn sale started happening? And because I'm sure that was a bit daunting.
Yes, it was tough because when I first got started, people didn't want to really come to it or whatever because they didn't, know what it was, or they weren't into antiques and vintage, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I love my town. I love Lafayette, but, in general, we're just still kind of behind the times. That's just how any small town generally goes. So it's nothing negative about them, but so it took a little time to teach, and like I said, since then, I mean, both communities have just been so supportive, especially Lafayette people, Macon County people. They have been very supportive of it, and I think just word of mouth has been my number one helper as far as getting the word out. Of course, now Facebook is huge, but back when
Yes.
I started, Facebook wasn't big like it is now. So, yeah, word of mouth is kind of what I have depended on to kind of promote my sales and hopefully get people wanting to come back each year.
Sure, that's one of the great things about small towns.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to you, the barn sale is much more than just a place to sell things. It's a place where you want people to leave really inspired and to go home with some great memories. Talk more about that.
Yes, I mean, I feel like, you know, you look at a mall or, a shopping mall, there's only so many times you want to go back there because you get the same thing. At the Starlight, I try to create with each sale something, change things up a little bit where, I have different sets because people love to take selfies with their finds and that kind of thing.
Yes.
So I try hard to create different things that keep people want to come back, to get inspired and motivated, whether it's just to go back to their home, and whether they never buy one thing, they just see how someone's got something arranged, and they go back home that night and redo it, or it's a place where they can come with their mom and just hang out for the weekend, or bring the kids, because we have stuff for the kids too. I mean, they love coming and just swinging on the tree swing. So yeah, I want it to be intimate. Like, some shows are so big and can be so overwhelming that it's just hard to get through it all and take it all in.
Mm-hmm.
But then some people, that's what they prefer. So I mean, it depends on the person. But I want to attract those people that prefer a smaller, intimate setting where they can go through and then go back and then decide what they want. Some shows you can go your full speed and still barely make it through the whole thing, and heaven forbid you try to go back and look at it again.
Yes.
So, yeah, I wanted it to be small and quaint and intimate, in a place that people just make it a tradition, like that each year they look forward to it and getting their girlfriends and coming and spending the weekend there.
I love that. So, with the barn sales becoming this huge success, something then eventually led you to starting the Fruit Tea Chicks, which is not a food truck, but tell us more about that.
I serve my tea out of a vintage inspired camper that I had custom built, and that kind of got started after seeing the market in Tennessee and surrounding states becoming saturated with barn sales. Like I said earlier, when I started, there was no competition. I mean, it was just, and if people wanted to come to a barn sale, they had to drive an hour or 3 hours to get to me because I was their only, choice.
Yeah.
Well, now, you can find one 3, almost every weekend. And so it's harder and harder to get people to drive, to me if they can go to one that's 15 minutes from their home.
Sure.
And so I'm a single mom, so I try to start thinking of, I needed a backup plan. What if this falls through? I've got to have something else lined up. But at the same time, I kind of wanted my kids to have something to do at my sale. I wanted them to learn to be entrepreneurs themselves, and know what it's like to have to work and earn money, because I've been working since I was young. So that's kind of what led me to get that started. But once I kind of got the ball rolling, I realized my kids really didn't want to work that hard. So suddenly what was supposed to be their kind of business turned into my full business, another full-time business for me. But honestly, I had no idea that it would take off like it did. I had no clue that it would.
And where did you get the idea for fruit tea?
Well, I grew up drinking fruit tea. My stepdad's mom, she played bridge all the time, and she would have these bridge parties, and she would they were kind of fancy things, and she would always make fruit tea, and I loved it. And then, in between having my barn sales, I also did other people's sales, and I would sell vintage and antiques and all that stuff too, my sewn goods. And I saw a tea vendor, and the line was like a mile long. And of course, I've never been a big tea drinker. And I thought, oh my goodness, if people will wait in line for sweet tea, I wonder wonder how they would do with fruit tea. So that's where kind of, but honestly, I found a journal entry back, I don't know, a couple months ago from back in 2009 where I used to journal and write down all my thoughts and stuff. And it was kind of the beginning stages of the barn sale before I started one. And I had forgotten it, but I had written in there that I wanted to sell fruit tea, my fruit tea, because I've been making fruit tea for years.
That's awesome.
And it's always kind of been a big hit. Like that would be what I would take to my garden club parties, and the old ladies, that's what they wanted me to bring. So, everyone had always loved it, my recipe. So, it had been in the works for a long time to sell it at my events, but not necessarily sell it as another business and travel around to other people's sales and sell it.
Wow. So did you start then at the barn sale, or did you start going other places right away?
My goal at my sales is for my vendors to do good. I worry myself to death over that, wondering if they're making money. I just want it to be about them. And I did not want to take away from another one of my food vendors, which I never had a drink vendor, but I'd had a couple of food trucks that sold fruit tea as part of their is one of their side items.
Okay.
So my biggest concern was, am I going to affect their sales if I start selling fruit tea? But then, I didn't do it for the first year. And then it became such a part of me and who I was, this other business, it only made sense to sell it there. And so then I started selling it there, and it was, it was my biggest show ever with my fruit tea was at the strawberry patch. I know that sounds weird because my sale is not even that big. Like I don't pull in like a huge crowd like some of these others, but it's exactly as big as I want it to be. It's all that I can handle. I'm a one-woman show, and so I'm not going to say I wouldn't like to grow a little more, but it's as big as like I can handle on my own.
Okay.
So I didn't start off having it there. My first show with my fruit tea was Swanky Plank, which is in Springfield, Tennessee.
Okay.
They gave me my first opportunity to sell it, and I'm forever grateful to them for that.
Wow. So how did it go? What was that like?
Well, it was a lot different than it is now because I was setting up in a tent.
Okay.
And I was serving out of like a canister, like that wasn't even chilled or didn't even have an agitator in it. So I would have to stir it the whole time. And I'm sure if the health department would have showed up, they would have shut me down but it did good. It kind of needed that first show to like under my belt so, I could move on to other shows. And so after serving out of my tent, which kind of got old quick, setting up the tent and pushing in freezers and coolers and, it was just a job. I decided that it was time to step things up, and that's when I ended up having the camper built.
And it's adorable. Everyone go follow the Fruit Tea Chicks on Instagram, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been so much easier. I don't dread it. It's packed down. You can't, when you open the door, stuff's falling out because, I have to carry everything. I can't just show up with my camper. I've got to decorate out front. And, but it's kind of like that with my barn sale. Like, even with my fruit tea, like I wanted it to be an experience. I didn't want it to be just another drink and a styrofoam cup. I wanted them to have a cup that they could take home with them, and I put my little garnish on top and my big straws. So, I try to make everything I do something, a memory or something that's not easily forgotten. So hopefully they'll come back to me.
I love it. And your camper just stands out among the others. Like, it's just so unique and cool. So
Thank you.
Yeah. So with all the traveling that this requires, how have you adjusted to that lifestyle?
That's probably been the toughest part of all of this, because I do have 3 kids that need me. But thankfully, I've had a wonderful man come in my life, and it's just, I don't think without him I could have kept up with the way it was going. I was having to hire someone to come in all the time because my work happens on the weekends. That's when fruit tea sells. It's not through the week. So, they're home. Well, they're with their dad every other weekend, but all the other time they're with me. So that was getting tough, and I was starting to get burnt out. But he stays with them now, so I don't have to worry about finding a babysitter, and I know they're taken care of. And it's tough. It's, especially, when that's the only time he's off, and when the kids are in school, when they're home, and then you're missing out because you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
But, I can't imagine ever working for anyone else again. I mean, once you get on your own and get a taste of that, it's hard to go back to having someone else tell you what to do. So I'm trying to just keep that in my mind, in the back of my head, when I start kind of getting burnt out, because most often I don't ever get a day off.
Wow.
It's just like, I leave out on a Thursday, I come back on Sunday, and then Monday and Tuesday is time to restock and clean out and make tea for the next event. So it's just like a never-ending cycle. But like I said, I'm at the farm. That's where I'm making the tea. I pull up the garage doors. I can see all the beauty. I turn up the radio, and I'm in my happy place. So that's kind of what keeps me going. And I know, I have off usually in December and January. Those are kind of my down months. So, and the kids are older and they understand. Hopefully they'll look back and appreciate, that I was trying to work to, pay the bills and get them the things that they need and want. And hopefully it'll kind of be their incentive to maybe own their own business or work hard one day.
Absolutely. Well, when I was there were several people just in the time that I was at your camper where they're asking, how do we buy this like in bulk, or where can we get more of this? And so what would you say to people?
Be patient. I just had a commercial kitchen built in my studio. So my inspection date is set for July 16th. So once that's over with and done with, I'll be seeking out stores like grocery stores, restaurants that will be willing to carry my tea. So I'm not sure exactly what direction I'm going with that yet, but I will be manufacturing here really soon. So just stay tuned as far as the stores that will be carrying it, and hopefully restaurants that you can buy it at.
Super exciting.
Yes, it is.
Well, what have you learned through these different businesses, and how has that shaped you?
I've learned to be tough and get thick skin. It's not easy. Growing up, I was always really sensitive. I wanted to be Miss Popular. I worried about people liking me. But once I started this business, especially the strawberry patch, I learned that if I wanted to be successful and hang on, because there are so many barn sales that started right after I did that have already fallen off.
Wow.
I had to keep in mind the look I wanted and the quality of vendors I wanted, and bring in things that I knew that would sell. The reality of it is I could have 150 vendors, at each sale, but I try to be mindful and choose those vendors that I know will be successful, based on the clientele that come to shop. And then you make enemies so easy, when you have to say, no, I'm sorry, and that's been tough. That's been really hard for me. but I've tried to just kind of keep in mind that, this is my business, this is my livelihood, this is what pays my bills. And then hopefully that one day those people will forgive me, because I'll tell you what, I get turned down all the time with my fruit tea chicks. It's tough. It's a tough world. There's so many food trucks out there. So, and I never get mad. I'm not going to say I don't get my feelings hurt, but it's that part of it has been the toughest part, is just having to hurt feelings or tell people no, or, making people follow the rules during the event. That's been the toughest part.
Well, I love to see how much you care about your vendors and the people that come there. So I love seeing that side of it, and hopefully that balances out.
Yeah, it does. I feel like I want to have a relationship with the vendors that come, and I want the shoppers to have a relationship with the vendors. I want it to, I want them to look forward to coming back and each year and buying a little piece from the vendor, each year they can take back and keep. And I try to foster those relationships and be there. And if people have questions, I always help them any way I can, whether it be, stuff to bring, or what not to bring, or if they're starting a new business themselves. I just try to make myself available, and I do care. I mean, I think most people that know me, I truly care about people, and I hope, that I've made that evident to the shoppers and vendors.
Yeah. Well, tell us what you love so much about Starlite Farm in Hartsville, Tennessee. I mean, this place, it looks like it's out of a magazine.
Hartsville, it's my hometown. It's where I was raised. Honestly, I swore I would never come back once I left for college, and somehow I ended up back there. But I can't think of a better place to raise my children. I mean, they're safe. The people are nice. The school systems are great. It's just a great town. And then Starlight kind of is like off in its own little world. It's, maybe 4 miles out of, the city limits or whatever, but it's so peaceful. I mean, you drive back there and you just hear the geese, or you hear the turkeys or the birds. And like I said, just raise the doors up and just sit back and relax, and, don't have to think about washing clothes. It's just my little place I go to just get away from everything. Honestly, like if I'm having a bad day, I just pull up there and it just seems like everything's gone. It's all washed away.
That's the best.
Mm-hmm. That's, and I hope to live there one day. I mean, that's my dream, is to build a little house out there, and just so I can be there 24/7.
That's awesome. Well, what's next for the Fruit Tea Chicks and for the Strawberry Patch Barn Sale?
Well, hopefully for the manufacturing side for the fruit tea, I'm looking forward to that and seeing what kind of opportunities come from that. The strawberry patch, this has kind of been a test year for me, because I used to have 2 shows a year, and this year was the first time that I've dropped it down to just a one sale in the fall. I just thought maybe it was time to try something different. Like I said, with all the new shows popping up, and then also getting so busy with the fruit tea business, I just, I've been doing them for so long. I didn't ever want to get to the point where I was dreading them. Mm-hmm. And I felt like because I had done them over and over and over back to back, I was kind of losing my creative vision. So I needed some time to give my mind some rest while I could come up with something new. And I'm really excited. This is the first show that I've actually looked forward to in a long time. We've got some really cute things coming, design sets for people to take their pictures with. The vendor lineup is amazing. We have a lot of the same, returning vendors, and then we have lots of new vendors coming this time. So I really think this is going to be a good year. I can't wait for September to get here.
That sounds awesome. And what are the dates of that?
It's September 6th through the 8th. It's always the weekend after Labor Day.
Okay, perfect. And how do people follow along with both of these different businesses?
Well, I'm on Instagram and Facebook for both, so Fruit Tea Chicks and the Strawberry Patch. And then that's for both Instagram and Facebook. And then I also have a website for the Strawberry Patch, which is thestrawberrypatchtn.com.
Okay, perfect. Well, we look forward to following your journey and seeing what happens with this new part of the Fruit Tea Chicks and everything. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, and I'm looking forward to following you as well.
Thank you. Oh, well, I loved hearing about the intentionality behind everything Christy does and how she cares about her vendors and customers. And I love that she's willing to change things up to keep her creative vision fresh. Well, the Strawberry Patch Fall Market is happening on September 6th, 7th, and 8th in Hartsville, Tennessee, and I can't wait to go and experience it all. And I hope to see you there, and we can meet up and go have some fruit tea together. Because I'm telling you, if you haven't had tea from the Fruit Tea Chicks yet, you're totally missing out. And I'm glad it's going to be available more places soon. That is so exciting. Well, that's it for this week. And thanks again to Christy Jo for being on the podcast. Have a great day, everybody. And we'll be back here with you next week.